Well, hello and welcome back to Module 2 of the Series 65 and 66 class, brought to you by Series 7 Specialists. Be sure to bookmark our website, series7specialist.com. Be sure to download the course outline, because I tell you what, you really need to be taking notes on this. There's a lot of information, and really a good place to capture those little aha moments, I call them, that are very, very likely to be on the test. So anyway, last time we went through the registration process up to and including tombstone ads. So now let's go ahead and pick back up with where we left off, top of page 2, and this is allowed activities during the registration period, during that cooling off period. We can, of course, prepare the preliminary prospectus, or another word for preliminary prospectus is red herring. Kind of got that nickname, kind of a pun, because it's not the real thing. It's just something we throw out for discussion, but also because it has, by law, it's in red. Up at the top, it has that it's subject to completion and the date of this prospectus is, and then some disclaimers that is not complete down the spine of the booklet. And so, thus, with the red print, it just kind of got the nickname of red herring, but that is allowable. Now, the thing about it is, with a red herring, we know ahead of time that it's going to be incomplete, because there are certain things that we can't know until the time comes to where we will be able to find out what they are. So, like, for instance, we don't know what the offering price is going to be. One of the things that we can do is that we can accept those non-binding indications of interest. Well, it's a gauge of the demand and supply. We know what the supply is, but we don't know until we start collecting those if the demand is going to be here, way up there, going to be way down low. We don't know. And so we might have to price that thing at the bottom end of the expected price range, or at the top side of it, maybe we're able to, or maybe even outside of that expected price range. We just don't know until we get there. So the price we're not going to have. If we don't have the price, and sometimes we don't even know the number of units, and we can't know the total proceeds, we can't know the net to seller, we can't know the compensation to the underwriting syndicate, all those things are unknown. We don't know what the effective date is going to be, because we don't know, we can't tell the SEC when to say it's now legal to sell this. And basically that's what your effective date is. It's all the effective date. The SEC is only saying, look, you filled out the proper paperwork and it's all filled out, completed. We don't really have any questions to ask you. Enough time has passed. Gosh, it's now legal to sell it. That's what they say on the effective date. They don't say anything about approving, it's okay, it's a good idea, people really should invest in it. No, nothing like that. In fact, any time on this or any FINRA test or NASA test that you see anything that even smacks of the word approval and any type of regulatory authority in the same sentence, that sentence is wrong. Because nobody approves anything, nobody approves anybody in this industry. And so, so that sentence is just wrong. So it doesn't have the offering price, the final numbers, the effective date. It does contain disclosures that the information is incomplete and subject to change. And like I say, that's in red right across the front cover. And then there's the disclaimer. The disclaimer, in more or less boilerplate wording, says, and it's just right in the middle of the cover sheet, that neither the Securities and Exchange Commission nor any state securities administrator has approved or disapproved of these securities, nor have they judged on the truthfulness, accuracy, or adequacy of any of the statements that are contained in it. Now, I've kind of forgotten the exact wording of it, but the last sentence I do not forget. That is that any representation to the contrary is a criminal offense. So anytime that you try to use anything that smacks of approval, that, well, look, I mean, it went through registration process, and the SEC said it's okay for us to sell. It must be okay. No, it's not okay. They said it's now legal to sell it. Enough time has passed. You filled out the paperwork, we don't have any questions. But they didn't say it was okay. There's nothing qualitative about that. So, like I say, just that's the disclaimer. It's on every prospectus in the world. So anyway, moving on to exempt securities, and this is where we start getting into the things that are just as important, if not more so, than the things that are. And you see kind of a strange sentence there below that a government regulator's list of charities is short. And some of those are in all caps. This sentence will help you to remember which securities are exempt under federal law, and then we'll use it again when we get to the Uniform Securities Act for state law, but there will be slightly different meanings to the words. It's very important for you to, like we said in the last module, to know those differences between the two. All right, but a government regulator's list of charities is short. Let me just go ahead and show you what I'm talking about here, okay? We will just go ahead and write that sentence out kind of vertically, and then tell what each of those are. So we have a government, regulators, and pardon me if I abbreviate here, list of, and for the federal government, that word list, it's just kind of a transitional word. It doesn't really have any meaning at the federal level. When we get to the Uniform Securities Act, it's going to have a definite meaning for us, okay? But for right now, just kind of transitional. I'm just going to leave it off of here. Of charities is short. And so let's see what we mean with these things, okay? First of all, government. If we have a governmental issuer, so if we have treasuries, U.S. Treasury securities, they will never go through registration because they're exempt. If we have agency issues, Ginnie Mae's. If we have municipal issues, those school boards, they're governmental entities. And so the securities that they issue, they're going to be exempt from registration and advertising, never from anti-fraud. There's nothing, I don't care who you are, what it is you're selling. If you're defrauding the public, you're subject to every anti-fraud provision that they can throw at you. So, like I say, you're never exempt from anti-fraud provisions. So a governmental agency or a governmental unit, that paper is going to be exempt from registration. If in 1933 there was a regulator in place, we're a little bit after on some of them. So what kind of regulators did we have? We had state banking commissions. So bank, and let's take a little time out here because for our purposes, first of all, what we want to do, when we see that word bank, we want to think about the first state bank think of the smallest town you can think of, okay? At Krebs, Oklahoma, okay? It's a little town that's outside of a little town in Oklahoma. And the first state bank, I mean, it had, you know how many branches it has? One. Yeah, everybody knows everybody, all right, and that's what we're talking about. Don't think about Bank of America or something like that, because the thing is that Bank of America actually is a holding company. It owns Bank of America North Carolina, it owns Bank of America California, it owns Bank of America Mortgage, and Merrill Lynch for that matter. It owns, you get the idea, okay? Same thing with Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, yeah, they own Wells Fargo Texas and Wells Fargo Advisors, what have you. So don't think of the Chase Corps and Citicorps of the world. Think of that first state bank that you've just got one branch and that's it. All right. Those others are holding companies, and so Citibank, is that's traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Is that actually a bank? No, it's a holding company. All right, so think about, like I say, just the pure banking function. Then you also had state insurance commissions. So insurance company issues. Okay. You also had the Interstate Commerce Commission back then. And so railroads or common carriers you may see. And what they're talking about here with common carriers are basically the equipment trust certificates that are issued to finance the purchase of rolling stock by railroads. That's a real good example to just kind of keep in mind there. But the buzzword is common carriers. Those are going to be exempt from registration. And then also later on we had the Small Business Administration and so SBICs or Small Business Investment Companies. Okay, those are going to be exempt at the federal level. May or may not be exempt at the state level. We won't worry about that right now. But in any event, if you see SBICs, you probably won't see that last one, but those are exempt from registration. So there's government, regulator, list of charities. So we have nonprofits, and fraternal organizations. Okay, now fraternal organizations, there may be a little bit of overlap with some of the others, but nonprofits like a church, church bonds, classic case of a charity. Well, that's an exempt security, all right? And then finally, short, as in short term. Less than 270 days. 9 months, okay, more or less, but 270 days is the exact amount, more than 270 days in 9 months. But like I said, less than 270 days. So what we're talking about here is commercial paper and bankers' acceptances. All right, those are short term. You know, you may have some 1 week commercial paper. Can you imagine going through a 20-day cooling off period for 1 week paper? It just doesn't make any sense, okay? So if it's less than 270 days, meets other certain requirements, then it's going to be exempt at the federal level because it has that short or short-term exemption. So governmental issuers, regulators in 1933 or later on, charities, and short as in short term. Those are exempt securities under the federal, the Securities Act of 33. So let's go ahead and just look at the highlights here. There's really not much to go over because it's not on there. Like I said, just a real easy way to do that. We get down to the bottom of page 2 and we start talking about exempt transactions. Now it's really important to know the difference between an exempt security and an exempt transaction. And actually I've found that the best way to illustrate that is by just talking about a guy that I did business with at one time. The guy, he had several businesses, but the one where he made his most money was that he sorted sand. Yeah, sorted sand. Very good eyes, very quick hands. I mean, he'd do that all, no, not really. What he would do is that he would take all the sand, dredge it up out of the river, and then put it into this big old hopper. Okay, and the hopper had some screens in it. I'm just going to draw 2 screens here in my hopper. All right, there we go. One, and they got progressively smaller as you went down. All right, so he'd dump everything in that first, in top of the hopper, and some of those pebbles would get caught there in that first screen, and they'd go over here. Well, you know, I mean, if you had some cash in your pocket and a pickup truck, he had a front loader and a big old pile of this stuff. Didn't make you a deal. Not much value there at all. Okay? Of course, everything that did not get caught here would go through the screen, but some of them were smaller and they'd get caught right there on the second screen. And you know, it more uniform, you know, they'd be smaller, prettier. Sell those for a little bit more money, say for masonry sand, you know, just because it looks pretty. You can get a little bit better price for that. Where he made his real money, though, down here at the very, very bottom. Okay? Very small, very uniform, very expensive. He'd sell this to sandblasting companies because if they had one pebble that was too big, man, the whole crew would shut down for an hour. So they would pay a premium price for this stuff because they needed that uniformity. So we don't really care that much about sand. Let's talk securities. The way that we figure out what we do with which security is very, very similar to this, okay? We take all of our securities, we dump them in the hopper. Some of them get caught on that first screen. These are our government. These are our regulators. These are our charities. These are our short term. They're exempt securities by the nature of the stuff. Okay? Those are never going to go through the registration process. They're out of the loop. Okay? That's it. We don't have to ask from there. Just the nature of the stuff. It either can go through the screen or it cannot. If it cannot go through the screen, then it's an exempt security. So if it can go through the screen, then by definition it's a non-exempt security. But some of these come to market in a certain manner, all right? And because of the way that they come to the marketplace, the way they're sold, who they're sold to, how they're sold, okay, these come to market in exempt transactions. All right, so it's the nature of the trade, who it's sold to and how it's sold, as opposed to what it is. Because this is just regular stock. These are just regular corporate bonds. All right, now, everything else you're registered. So if there's not an exemption because of what the stuff is or how it comes to market, then it gets registered. All right. So let's look at some of those exempt transactions. And we start out with and it probably won't need to know the rule number as much as what the deal is with these. Rule 147 is the first one, intrastate transactions. Now, in case you have trouble with the Latin, let me just go ahead and do this and do the little cheesy way to remember. We have INTRA state. Everything happens within a state. But if you have INTER state, then you're not only in this state, but you're also involving activities in some OTHER state. So multiple states. Now this is where the federal government has jurisdiction. The Interstate Commerce Commission. See, they don't have an Intrastate Commerce Commission. It's outside of their reach. That's this is the jurisdiction of the states. And so so if it is a bona fide intrastate transaction, then it falls beyond the scope of the federal government and to the scope of the states. So if you have a bona fide intrastate transaction, which means that the company can be here. It has to be in this state, whichever state it is. Just think of your own state. All of the buyers, all of them, have to be in that state. 80% of the revenue, 80% of the assets, 80% of the sales of that business have to be in this state, whichever state that is. And there's another lockup rule where if I were to buy an intrastate issue, I could not sell it to the guy who used to live next door to me, but now he lives up in Kansas, I live in Oklahoma. No, can't do that. It's got to be a bona fide transaction that's within the bounds of the state, and if so, then it gets a federal exemption. Going to the top of page 3, the next is Regulation D, private placements. Now the way that I remember which regulation is which on this one, D could easily stand for the word direct. I'm going to sell this stuff directly to large institutions and individual investors of either substantial means or substantial assets, substantial income. Okay? So what are the requirements? Well, first of all, there's no restriction on how big it is. And I have seen just huge private placements. But the thing is that the only people we sold it to were institutions and people who met the requirements, the accredited investors. You can have an unlimited number of those accredited investors. Now, time out in just a minute, because last module I told you how important it was to separate out the federal and the state and actually refer to this. We're talking about a federal transaction exemption. Okay? Federal transaction exemption. And so the word accredited investor goes with the federal definition of a private placement. To the state, there you got private placements, okay, but accredited investor, that's just Bob, that's Sue, that's Fred, it's just folks, regular people. It doesn't matter that they happen to make a lot of money or not, they're just folks. And so accredited investor means something only at the federal level, not at the state level. So who is an accredited investor? All right, someone who has income, and remember this was put together back in 1933 when $200,000 of income was a ton of money, and over the last 2 years, so it's not just a fluke, okay? If it's a joint account, you don't have to double it up, you just go from 2 to 3, or they have $1 million of net worth, or they're an officer or a director of the company. Regardless of the officer or director's income or net worth, they're automatically accredited investors. That's because they're spending 14, 16 hours a day down there. They know what's going on. This is their baby. I mean, for crying out loud, they started the thing, and they know exactly what they're getting into. So they automatically become accredited investors in a private placement or an accredited institution. And like I said, a maximum of 35 just regular folks. Yes, you can sell it to Bob. Bob's income was $190,000 last year and $180,000 the year before. Well, he didn't quite make it, okay? Net worth is $500,000, $700,000. And so if it's suitable for Bob, yeah, you can sell it. Him and 34 other folks just like him. But you hit that 36th, what have you done? Boom! You've all of a sudden made it a public offering. It's no longer a private placement. It no longer has that transaction exemption. All right, so that's a private placement. And then other exempt transactions are the Regulation A. Now, the way I remember Regulation A is that if we were to number off the letters, A would be the smallest number. Well, these are the smallest offerings, $5 million or less. That's really a fairly small offering. You're going to wind up spending about a third of the proceeds of the transaction in lawyers and registration fees. So there's a small dollar offering exemption for $5 million or less. Rule 144 is another exempt transaction, and that's for folks who, the founders of the company, that officer we talked about, started this thing with $100,000 of his own money, and who knows how much time and effort. All right, he's been working his fingers to the bone for however long, but all of a sudden he wakes up one morning and the accountant calls him and says, "Hey, congratulations." "Oh, why is that?" "Well, you reached $100 million in value in your company." "Whoa, that's all right. That's great. Oh, and let's see. By the way, we the kid's getting ready to go to college. Can I sell some of this stock that I've got? Because when I put that $100,000 in, I got something back." And it was stock in the company that's now worth tons of money. Can I sell that? All right, so yes, okay, that's going to allow, kind of the dribble out rule is sometimes what it's called. It allows officers, investors, folks, those angel investors, the original, the folks who bought the stuff on a Reg D private placement. Okay, now the thing's trading publicly, and they can actually sell their stock a little bit at a time within certain bounds on a 144 sale. Or 144A is another exempt transaction, because remember, one accredited investor is a qualified institution. And so institutions can trade back and forth this restricted stock, is what it's called, the unregistered stock, without significant restrictions under Rule 144A. And so they're able to do that. You don't have the potential for abuse with institutions that you have with individuals, and so they're a lot freer with their ability to trade restricted stock. And the registration process, finally, to wrap up this section, the registration statement that's filed with the SEC must be signed by the CEO, the CFO, and a majority of the board of directors. Now, this is real important for one reason. That reason is it frequently shows up on the test. All right, so anyway, like I say, CEO, CFO, majority of the board of directors. So we've kind of hit a breaking point. We've hit about the end of our a little bit over our 20-minute period. But in any event, we appreciate you bookmarking the site, subscribing to us on YouTube. We appreciate you leaving comments. Comments help us out a lot as we try to get these things introduced and get some sponsors lined up. So we really do appreciate all the help you've given us. We'll go ahead and break it off here. We'll see you back in a few minutes for Module 3.